Hello, church family. It's good to see everybody this week. We're going to be in Proverbs chapter 31, and thank you for joining me for the Bible study this week. It's going to be a little bit different this week. I'm on kind of vacation with Lauren, my daughter, and Brandon, my son-in-law, and we're in Angel Fire, New Mexico, and I've come to New Mexico and I forgot to bring my razor and a dress shirt, and I had to find a quiet place to do the lesson, and so I'm in the truck in Angel Fire, New Mexico. But thank you for being a part of the Sunday school lesson. We are going to have a good time in Proverbs chapter 31, and the title of the lesson is Finding Honor. The lesson theme for this week is that God recognizes those who faithfully demonstrate his wisdom in their lives. And in Proverbs chapter 31, we're especially going to be looking at for the lesson this week, the lives of wives. Our memory verse is, I have instructed you today, even you, so that your confidence may be in the Lord. And that's Proverbs chapter 22, verse 19. Our key doctrine for the lesson this week is man, and the sacredness of human personality is evident in that God created humans in his own image, and in that Christ died for humans. Therefore, every person of every race possesses full dignity and is worthy of respect and Christian love. As a review for our background information, we want to remember that Proverbs is a book that's full of just pure wisdom from God. And a proverb is a statement of truth that that people have used and are familiar with for a long time. And the book of Proverbs is really a compilation of the Proverbs written by King Solomon, who was the son of King David. He reigned as king from 970 to 931 BC. And so that's the Proverbs that we are studying today, Proverbs chapter 31. In the last two chapters of the book of Proverbs, which we've made our way all the way from Proverbs chapter 1 all the way to the last two chapters, a name is given in the introduction of each of the chapters. Agur is the name that identifies the writer for chapter 30. Well, some people think, oh, well, somebody else wrote this proverb, but many scholars believe that was just another name for Solomon. The same thing is we're going to see in Proverbs chapter 31, King Lemuel. Some think, oh, well, another king wrote this proverb, but Lemuel means devoted to God. And so there's nothing wrong with believing and seeing this as being another proverb that was written by Solomon. Now, we're not covering the first part of the chapter today, but in the first verses of the chapter, three things that he talks about, which is important, and we want to remember these, is that first, the proverb chapter 31 is credited to the mother of the king. This was wisdom and advice that she had given the king concerning wives and concerning women. And the first thing that she instructed him to do, not concerning women, but she instructed him to avoid the temptation to use his power as a means to engage in immorality or to destroy kings. Second, she taught him to stay sober, insisting that alcohol would have a negative effect on his decision-making and could destroy him as a king. And third, she directed him to use his authority to help those that couldn't help themselves and to seek justice for them. In the second half, which is what we're going to be studying today, Lemuel describes the character of a good and godly wife. So this chapter is especially important for wives. Now, husbands, I want to advise you, don't tell your wife that she needs to listen to the Sunday school lesson over and over till she learns the truths. Don't tell your wife she needs to read the Proverbs chapter 31 over and over till she learns the truths. That's not, you let the Holy Spirit lead her and guide her, and not you. It doesn't work very well that way. One thing that happened to me, and I learned this by I'll I learned this by doing it the wrong way. But years and years ago, I thought it was funny. I brought home uh, a little article, and it was out of Better Homes and Gardens from 1950, and it says how to be a good housewife, and I put it on the refrigerator. Well, my wife Carrie didn't think that was funny at all, and she tore it up and threw it in the trash. So trying to get your wife to look at Proverbs chapter 1, trying to post it on the refrigerator is not going to work. Don't do it. That's not the right way. For our first thoughts for the lesson today, turn in your personal study guides to page 100, and it's talking about most of us go through our days and carry out our tasks without thinking that somebody is watching us, and we'd be surprised to find out that somebody has watched us and made an evaluation of what we're doing. Well, in today's world, lots of times it feels like I got people watching me. I think my cell phone listens to what I'm saying. I think my Alexa listens to what I'm saying at home, because I'll be talking about something, and next thing you know, I've got commercials or ads popping up on my phone. So I think there's more people listening to us than we think. But the point we want to make with our first thoughts is, as we go through our lives, God is watching us, and He is going to evaluate the way that we live our lives. And so we've got to keep that in mind. If we're going to be a good and godly wife and bring honor to God, well, God's watching. We have to live the way that God told us we need to live. Point number 1 in our lesson today is going to be commitment to her husband. A godly wife is going to show and have commitment to her husband. And that's Proverbs chapter 31. We're going to be looking at verses 10 and 11, and it's on page 101 in your personal study guides. Lemuel characterized the excellent wife as one who shows that she's gained the trust of her husband, knowing she's committed to helping him succeed all of her days. And verse 10 starts out and says, "Who can find a wife of noble character? She is far more precious than jewels." And one thing, as I was studying through the lesson, knowing my wife, Carrie, is the way that I do, I found that she's, a lot of these verses are a pretty good picture of her. As we study through the lesson, I think you might find that you'll see this verse or that verse with Carrie's name just written all over it, or you might see, oh yeah, that verse is a pretty good picture of Carrie. And so I want to brag on my wife, and she has been a noble character. What verse 10 wants to point out is a wife of noble character is difficult to find. It's like finding a diamond. It's not something you just stumble across on top of the ground. Most of the time, you've got to dig, you've got to work for it. And a wise husband who experiences the blessings that come from having that kind of wife in his life considers himself to be fortunate. He knows it's not just he was lucky. I mean, he's glad and he's excited and he's thankful and feels that he's blessed to have a wife that's a good wife. Point number 1 continues with verse 11 in the commitment to her husband, in that the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not lack anything good. The point that verse 11 is trying to make is that because of her commitment to her husband, because of her commitment to her marriage, she's going to make sure that he doesn't lack anything. She's going to try to do the best she can to take care of him, to provide for him, to help him, to be his helpmate, and to be his assistant and do all that she can to make their family and their marriage great. And that's the way a good and godly wife is going to be. And a husband that has one like that needs to make sure he's showing some appreciation for it. Verse 12 also comes under the heading of commitment to her husband. And it says in verse 12, she rewards him with good, not evil, all the days of her life. The lesson we want to learn from verse 12 is that a godly wife that wants to bring honor to God is going to have a commitment that rewards her husband. It brings rewards to him with a consistent supply of blessing. She's an asset to the family. She's an asset to the marriage. Point number 2 in our lesson is on page 103, and it says that a godly woman, a godly wife, is going to be wise in her work. And we're going to be looking at Proverbs chapter 31, verses 13 through 16. And in this section, Lemuel pointed to the savvy skills and prudence of the wife who wisely participates in providing for the needs of her family. And the first verse is verse 13. And that's what this verse has Carrie's name written all over it. She selects wool and flax and works with her hands willingly. And that's what Carrie is a great worker. And she's even working this week as I've come to be on vacation with Lauren and Brandon. Thank you, Carrie. In verse 13, the point that is trying to be taught is that a wise, godly wife is going to be willing to work. The wool and the flax were used in Solomon's day to make clothing, and it was tedious work. It took a lot of labor-intensive work to make the clothing, but she did it willingly. She was glad to do it to help her family out. Verse 14 says, she is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She's wise in her work because she doesn't mind going out shopping and bringing the produce, bringing the products back to make sure that her family is well taken care of. And I don't know if you can see it, but this is a pretty good picture of Carrie. The wife in verse 14 was willing to go to great lengths to help her family, to meet her family's needs. She would extend her reach to the farthest corners of the world in order for her family to have what they needed. And in today, it's a lot easier to do that. With Amazon, you can get anything from anywhere. Our next verse under wise in her work is verse 15, and it says that she rises while it is still night and provides food for her household and portions for her female servants. A lazy person who has no initiative is going to be one that sleeps well into the morning. It takes them a long time to get started. But in our lesson is trying to teach that a woman with noble character would greet the day well before the sunrise. She's going to get started. She's going to make sure that the household has what it needs to get running. She's even going to make sure that the female servants have enough to get their day started also. She's going to make sure they have breakfast. She's going to make sure they have instructions. And so she is organized. She's getting the day going. In today's society, in our society today, it's a lot easier. We may not have servants the same way that they did in Solomon's day, but our servants are the dishwasher. We just have to load it up, turn it on. The washing machine, just load it up, turn it on. The dryer, load it up, turn it. A wise woman today has it a lot easier. Actually, we just get them going, get our servants going. This is another verse under our wise in her work that seems to have Carrie's name written all over it. But it says she evaluates a field and buys it. She plants a vineyard with her earnings. In this verse, the wife is showing organizational skills that are important for managing the household and managing the family and helping her husband out. And she didn't think about the purchase of the property in terms of some personal luxury or self-indulgence. Instead, she thought only in terms of how the property would provide for the needs of her family. She was trying to help the family out. She was trying to build up the finances for the family, and she was wise in thinking about it and planning for it and then carrying it out. In point number 3 for our lesson, it's sure in her reputation. The noble woman, the wise woman, the godly woman is sure in her reputation. Lemuel described the excellent wife as having influence in the community out of people's respect for her character. He emphasized that the wife spoke and taught wisdom. We start in verse 23, And it says, her husband is known at the city gates, where he sits among the elders of the land. Now, this verse might seem a little odd to us because we don't live the same way they did back in Solomon's day. But in Solomon's day, they had walled cities, and then you had gates to come in and enter into the city. Well, at the city gate, a lot of times the leaders of the city would sit and they'd conduct business. And it served as a location where the men would gather to conduct business and attend to legal affairs and legal issues. And the husband of a woman of noble character would have a superb reputation there. Not only would the godly wife, the wife of noble character, have a good reputation because she helped her husband and aided and assisted her husband so much at in his leadership position and being seen as a man of character at the front gates in the city, but she would also have a good reputation with the other traders, with the other merchants in the town, the ones that conducted business. And we see this in verse 24. It says, she makes and sells linen garments. She delivers belts to the merchants. Verse 24 is trying to teach us that the woman of noble character that should be admired. The merchants would admire the high quality linen garments she had made with her own hands. And the belts that she had offered for sale would reflect the same kind of excellence. This verse also reminds me of Carrie. But verse 25, it says, strength and honor are her clothing, and she can laugh at the time to come. The point that this verse is trying to make and to teach us is that because of her planning, because of the things that she had done, because of her character, the future doesn't frighten her. She knows her household is prepared for whatever's going to come. She faces the uncertainties of the time to come with a stalwart determination. She is not worried about what's going to happen. It's not a flippant where she doesn't care, but she says, look, I've made plans. I know my household's going to be set. We've got enough food. We've got enough clothing. We can make it through the situations that are coming our way. The woman of noble character also is going to have a mouth that speaks wisdom, and that's what we see in verse 26. She's going to have a good reputation because her mouth speaks wisdom and loving instruction is on her tongue. Her influence on the people in her life through what she says to them also speaks volume about her reputation. She takes every opportunity to share God's wisdom with them. She's seeking opportunities to be a witness. She's seeking opportunities to teach them the truths about God. Our final verse is verse 27 under the heading, Sure in Her Reputation. And it says, she watches over the activities of her household and is never idle. This is an important verse for wives today, is to make sure they're using their time wisely. It's easy with today's society to spend lots of time in idleness, watching TV, doing Facebook, playing other games on the computer. It's easy to waste lots of time, but a godly wife is not going to do that. Instead of wasting her days in self-indulgent luxury, she takes the initiative to manage her day wisely, guiding others under her supervision, as well as managing her own projects that require her to make the best use of her time. Our final point is point number 4, and it's honored through fearing God. The noble wife is going to be honored through fearing God. Lemuel described the excellent wife as being a blessing to her family and to her community. And when she is, verse 28 will be true. Verse 29 will be true. Verse 28 says, her children will rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. Verse 29 says, many women have done noble deeds, but you surpass them all. And I don't know how many of you could see it, but this is a pretty good picture of Carrie. In this verse, we learn that when her wise husband observes the blessing, he's been given in such a remarkable wife, he can't stop singing her praises either. And her children can't stop singing her praises. He's elated that he's found in her what his heart longed for in life. That's why he declares her to be the best woman in the world. Next, we see verse 30, and it says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. In this verse, we see what truly sets apart a woman of noble character, a good and godly wife, is her fear of the Lord. She knows one day she's going to have to give an account of how she lived and how she lived as a wife and how she treated her family, how she treated her husband. And so she wants to have and be able to be rewarded and be able to stand before God and not be ashamed. Physical beauty should not matter the most in our marriages because it's fleeting. We can't always be the beauty queen that we were when we were younger. Even the best efforts to preserve beauty will eventually fail because it can't last forever. But living for God will bring lasting praises. In our final verse for this lesson and in the book of Proverbs, which we'll be finishing today with chapter 31, verse 31, it says, give her the reward of her labor and let her works praise her at the city gates. In our final verse, in the case of the godly wife whose noble character traits set her apart from other women, a public display of honor took place at the city gates. Her excellent example provides Christians with a wise path to living in a way that honors Him. She set a great example for Christian wives today to follow and to live by and to try to live up to. We may not can do it perfectly. We may not can be the perfect godly wife, but that doesn't mean we don't try to do our best and to follow Him. And you'll be rewarded. Hopefully your husband will praise you. Hopefully your husband will see what a blessing you are, and you can know that God will reward you for living a life that brings honor to Him. Thank you, Carrie. You're the best. In My Context is on page 108 in your personal study guides. And the points we want to take away from the lesson are: believers are to honor their marriage commitments. Believers are to wisely provide for the needs of their families. Believers are to use their influence for the kingdom, and believers are to honor God with their lives. Next week is going to be session number 12 in the Song of Songs. We're finished with the book of Proverbs. We're moving on to the Song of Songs. And I encourage you to study your lesson. Have a great week. May God bless you. Thank you for being a part of the lesson this week.